Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. In some places, it's floods, other spots, fires or smoke caused by fires. Add it all up, and tens of millions of people across the country are dealing with some sort of extreme weather today. Strong storms dumped several inches of rain in the Carolinas yesterday, closing roads like this one in Charlotte. And it's not over yet there. More rain is falling across that area this morning, causing a sunrise headache for commuters. Out west, wildfires are exploding in size. In Central California, what's known as the Grifford Fire is burning more than 83,000 acres, threatening nearly 900 structures. That has forced hundreds of people to evacuate from their homes. And smoke from Canada's wildfires is creating issues for us here in the Northeast. At least 10 states are under air quality alerts, with cities on the East Coast and in the Midwest waking up to hazy skies. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda is in New York City, one of the places blanketed in smoke.
Hey there. Well, it's just been an unrelenting week of smoky skies. 10 states are facing air quality alerts yet again today, and we have seen some improvement, but you can see how that haze just continues to hang over the New York City skyline as hundreds of wildfires burn and expand from California to Canada, forcing highways to shut down, evacuations, and sending thick plumes of smoke hundreds of miles away across the continent. In California, officials say there have been more than 4,400 wildfires in the first half of this year. That's actually up 14% compared to the same time period in last year. Meantime, in the south, a very different weather woe. The region has just been waterlogged. Parts of the Carolinas seeing more than 5 inches of rain and strong wind gusts just yesterday alone. It's turned roadways into more like riverways and flooded homes as well. Back here in the New York City area, health experts are urging people to be on the lookout for symptoms of poor or unhealthy air quality. They say some of the first signs of that, a scratchy throat and watery eyes. Back to you.
All right, Emily, thank you. For more on the extreme weather, what you can expect, let's bring in meteorologist Amelia Draper. She joins us from our Washington, D.C. affiliate WRC with your morning news now weather. Amelia, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. First, I want to start with the wildfires burning up in Canada. So far, about 16.8 million acres have been burned. To give you an idea of how large that is, that's a little bit larger than the state of West Virginia. Canada is on track to have its second worst wildfire season ever. And by the way, there are currently 756 active wildfires right now. Now, today, we're going to see winds coming out of the south. What that is going to do, it's going to push the smoke to the north and to the east. So for areas like the Midwest, the Great Lakes, we are going to start to see the smoke disperse there, but not necessarily the case in the Northeast. We're looking at this lingering plume that's going to continue to impact the area, at least today, potentially tomorrow. And while the Mid-Atlantic has been spared from the haze, from the smoke, we could actually see the air quality degrade there today on into tomorrow. So looking at that air quality forecast, unhealthy air remains in effect for parts of the Great Lakes and the Northeast. Meanwhile, here are the wildfires burning out west. There are around 50 large fires burning right now, and weather conditions there not helping out today. Here's a look at the fire weather threat. It's a critical risk for areas like Cedar City and Grand Junction. When you factor in warm, windy conditions and low relative humidity, it helps wildfires spread very easily. It leads to difficulty in getting them contained. And looking at the temperatures out here, I mean, look at this. Albuquerque right now running more than 11 degrees above normal at 100 today. Tucson about 15 degrees above normal. As we look to tomorrow, the heat does not improve out in the southwest. We're looking at Lubbock coming in at 108. That's almost 10 degrees above normal. Dodge City also running almost 10 degrees above normal. Now, the good news is this heat dome will start to break down as we head toward the end of the week. But then in the southeast, it's all about the heavy rain once again, with flood alerts in effect for a good portion of Georgia, including Atlanta, Macon, and Albany, up into parts of North Carolina. Right now, Durham is under a flash flood warning, with nearly 1 to 2 inches of rain already falling during these early morning hours. Here's a look at the current radar there right now. You can see that heavy rain impacting parts of Virginia down into the Carolinas. So as we head through these next few days in the south, a storm system, it's stalled there and it's going to linger. So today, heavy rain continues for parts of North Carolina and Virginia. Getting into the afternoon hours, showers and thunderstorms along the southeast coast. Then as we head on into tomorrow, this stalled front there generates more areas of rain, Joe. So this weather pattern that we're looking at, it's kind of stuck across most of the country for now.
Yeah, just no relief there in the southeast.
Right.
All right, Amelia, thank you so much. The redistricting battle in Texas is escalating this morning. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is asking the state Supreme Court for permission to remove a key Democrat from office. The lawsuit was filed on Tuesday. It argues that State Representative Jean Wu violated the state constitution and that his absence amounted to an abandonment of office. Representative Wu is the House Democratic Caucus chair in Texas. Earlier this week, many Texas House Democrats fled the state in order to delay Republican efforts to redraw the congressional map, giving congressional Republicans 5 more seats. Wu responded to the lawsuit on MSNBC, speaking with Jen Psaki last night.
It's simply insanity. Look, I mean, first of all, this seat doesn't belong to me. The sheriff's cell doesn't belong to the governor. This seat belongs to the people of the state of Texas, and I took an oath to protect them and defend them. And when the governor conspires with a corrupt president to use illegal, unconstitutional racial gerrymandering to strip power from hardworking communities who have spent decades building up their power, building up their voice, only to have President Trump steal it from them, I took an oath to defend against that.
NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell joins us now. So, Kelly, we heard yesterday from the president that the FBI could get involved and round up the Democratic lawmakers who fled. Tell us more about what the president said, and does that seem likely right now?
Well, what we're seeing play out in a broad sense is how lawmakers, the governor, and now the national level officials are looking at what tools are in the toolbox in terms of the law and court redress to see how can they manage this situation. So because lawmakers who are Democrats in Texas have left their state, the bounds of how the governor can control or compel them to come back are very limited. So that is how you look to a national police agency like the FBI. Certainly, there are questions about whether it is lawful for the FBI to try to compel them to return to their states. In a criminal context, you could have extradition from one state to another. This is a very different set of circumstances. The president was asked about this in a sweeping set of questions and answers with reporters, and he opined on whether the FBI could get involved and suggested it might be possible. Here's how the president responded.
They may have to. They may have to. No, I know they want him back. Not only the attorney general, the governor wants him back. If you look, I mean, the governor of Texas is demanding they come back. So a lot of people are demanding they come back. You can't just sit it out. You have to go back. You have to fight it out. That's what elections are all about.
So the president is talking about wanting those Democratic lawmakers back in the state of Texas. Of course, given the majority is there, they believe that if that vote goes forward, they would lose the power that you heard the legislator talk about and his concerns. So this is a fight that we see every decade. What is unusual here is that it is happening mid-decade at a time when there has not been a refreshed census that gives information about how many voters are in what parts of any given state. To determine how those lines should be drawn. It's always a political kind of mud wrestling match. In this case, it has been amplified by the president wanting to ensure that he could have potentially more seats in the National Congress going into the midterms next year.
Kelly, meantime, there have also been these growing calls from Democratic majority states to do the same thing as Texas if Texas does push ahead with these redistricting plans. What are we hearing there? Could we see these states retaliate?
Well, what we typically would see is that Democrats would argue that this should be done in a more orderly way once a decade. And when that happens, it really is an all-out fight to get the lines that best reflect what the legislature of either party that controls it can determine. Now we are hearing from Democrats that they might need to employ what they're calling a fire with fire approach, that if it's happening in a state like Texas, maybe blue dominant states, Democrat majority states should also examine examine ways to plus up potential seats for them. Again, it's not determining who gets the seat, but it is drawing lines that could benefit based on knowledge of the population of which party might be more favorable there. So it's not a guarantee, but it certainly adjusts the playing field. So we're seeing that debated in states like Illinois, like New York, that have a Democratic governor because there's a veto power, as well as a dominant legislature.
Kelly, while we have you, we do understand there have been some new developments in the battle over the release of those Jeffrey Epstein files. What is the latest there?
Well, certainly there are lots of changes here and lots of incremental steps. And part of what we have seen is the House Oversight Committee is subpoenaing the Department of Justice for all of its records on the Epstein files for the committee to use in its review. Also sending out subpoenas and summons for a spate of national officials who they want to hear from, very big, bold names. And then we're also hearing that Ghislaine Maxwell, the co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein, who is serving 20 years in prison, her lawyers are pushing back against public release because they argue that she has constitutional rights in trying to pursue any kind of relief on her sentence, and they don't want to see it happen. So there are a number of developments, as you'll see in my report.
This blunt and jarring new statement in a case commanding much public attention. Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell is not. Those words from Maxwell's attorneys as they filed a request to block the government's efforts to release long secret grand jury transcripts in the investigation of infamous sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Maxwell is serving 20 years as Epstein's co-conspirator in the sex trafficking of young women. Her lawyers insist that despite whatever interest the public may have in Epstein, her legal options are viable and her due process rights remain. Attention has swirled around Maxwell after the Department of Justice conducted 2 days of interviews with her in July. And later, she was transferred from a Florida prison to a lower security camp in Texas that typically does not house sex offenders. The president said he played no role in her move.
I didn't know about it at all. No, I read about it just like you did.
In a separate development, a fresh round of congressional subpoenas that target a group of prominent national figures, including Bill and Hillary Clinton. House Oversight also subpoenaed 6 former attorneys general and 2 past FBI directors, seeking their testimony this fall. Epstein victims are also weighing into the court about the potential of releasing those transcripts with mixed reviews. One woman writing, "I am not some pawn in your political warfare," while another said, "This transparency and accountability is a form of justice."
And as developments keep happening, sources that we have talked to say that there is some consideration being given to releasing the transcript of the 2 days of interviews conducted by a senior official in the Justice Department, the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, and Ghislaine Maxwell. She was given limited immunity to do that question and answer, meaning her responses, if truthful, could not be used against her. So could those transcripts become public? That's something that we are told is being considered. So we'll be watching for more developments. Joe?
All right. Kelly O'Donnell, thank you so much. We have NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos here with us for more on this. I want to pick it up right there with that point that Kelly was making. That source familiar with the matter told NBC News, quote, "We're leaning toward transparency when it comes to whether to release the files." Is this something the department can just do, release these files? And is it something Maxwell can fight? As a defense attorney, why would you maybe not want these files out there?
Right. There are 2 categories, really, of information. There is grand jury proceedings, and we've already dealt with that separately. That's the kind of thing that remains very secret, but it's going to be minimalist because it's the bare bones minimum the government needs in order to present to a grand jury to get to an indictment. Far more interesting is going to be the banker's boxes of documents and records that DOJ simply has already in their possession. There are limitations as to what they can reveal and what they can disclose. There are issues of privacy. As you can see, different victims have different approaches to what they would like released, but DOJ has to consider privacy and other factors in deciding what, if anything, they're going to release, because they can't just wholesale dump everything out there. There are considerations similar to the way freedom of information laws apply. There are exemptions to what you can and cannot release from government records.
Let's talk about this minimum security federal prison that Maxwell was moved to. It's a dormitory-style facility. Doesn't typically house inmates like Maxwell, convicted of a sex crime, serving a lengthy sentence, drawing a lot of questions and criticism. One former official at the Bureau of Prisons told NBC News it was a travesty of justice. Is there a compelling reason she should have been moved to this?
First, you happen to be talking to a person who does not put a lot of stock in a former BOP official's opinion about travesties of justice. I'm a defense attorney. I'm biased. Most of my dealings with BOP are not pleasant. However, that being said, it is true that Maxwell was technically ineligible for a minimum security camp, which, by the way, as a defense attorney, is the greatest place you can get your client to. You want low security where she was is not bad. Minimum security camps are fantastic. So that is a benefit. So let's take a step back because there are parts of this that are strange and parts that are not. If Ghislaine Maxwell has information that the government was interested in, we don't know what it was, but obviously she did because they met with her for 9 hours. So something is interesting there. If I'm her attorney, I'm going to want something out of this deal. This is the same government that put my client in prison, rightfully or wrongfully. It's straight up business because you're negotiating with the government. You want to talk to her for 9 hours? Give us something. And if that something is moving from a low security to a minimum security, that's true. She is technically ineligible. The BOP had to give her a waiver for that, but they can do it when they want to do it. So did she get something in return for talking to the government? Absolutely. And she should have. Her attorneys did a good job negotiating that because otherwise you could tell the government to go pound sand.
Of course, the question is, what did she say? We'll have to find out more about that. Let's talk about this House Oversight Committee, these subpoenas. It's a GOP-led committee. They want to hear from the Clintons and these former Justice Department officials. First of all, I assume we're going to see some pushback to these subpoenas. How sharp are the teeth on these subpoenas?
Absolutely. And we've talked about this so many times, Joe. There is such a difference, even though the word is the same subpoena, there is such a difference between a judicial or a grand jury subpoena and a congressional subpoena. Often a congressional subpoena just means the initiation of negotiations about how, when, or if we're going to comply with this subpoena. So you better believe that whatever date is on those subpoenas, none of those recipients that we just saw in all those photos, none of them are going to respond promptly on that day. Look at all of those names. Every one of them is going to be contacting Congress, contacting the attorneys, seeing what they can do to limit or even avoid having to show up and provide documents, information, or testimony, because they have a pretty good argument that a lot of these, even though Congress has broad investigative authority, there's a lot of negotiation room here because it seems like a very vague fishing expedition at this point.
Those are some pretty big name people there that would be appearing.
Very big names.
All right, Danny, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We're now just one day away from President Trump's sweeping new tariffs taking effect, and they're set to hit nearly every U.S. trading partner. Here to talk more about this, NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Brian, good to have you with us. So the big day is nearly upon us. Where could we see some of the biggest price rises, and just how soon could that happen?
Joe, short answer is basically everywhere, and that's because of the scale and scope of these tariffs, which are set to take effect, as you point out, midnight tonight into tomorrow. And I know a lot of people have been thinking, I've been hearing about these tariff headlines for months now. Why should I take this any more seriously than we have in the past with the president having kicked the can down the road? Well, it's because the president and this United States have inked these so-called deals with a number of countries that have said, look, here is the tariff rate that you're going to pay. Effective tomorrow, it could be 15, 20, even higher that percent that you'll be paying, and that is going to be effective. So this is the realest threat that we've seen of things like grocery prices increasing, clothing and footwear, coffee, as well as olive oil, beer, wine, spirits, cars, housing materials, energy costs. These are all things that can get more expensive. If you look at clothing, for example, there's a 20% effective rate on Vietnam that could impact the price that you pay for shoes and other items that come from that country effective tomorrow. Then there's also Brazil, where you have this 50%, a gnarly tariff of that scale that could be impacting the cost of your coffee beans going up by that much as well. These are all set to take effect tomorrow. Could there be some sort of last-minute midnight deal with these countries to lower those rates? In theory, yes. The White House hasn't closed the door to that. But again, it seems like this is the realest threat that we've seen with those tariff rates set to dramatically increase effective tomorrow, Joe.
And Brian, we also heard from the president yesterday on CNBC threatening higher tariffs on pharmaceutical imports. He said they could eventually go as high as 250%. What would something like that mean for consumers? Why does the president want to push this so high?
Yeah, the president arguing that those pharmaceutical products should be made here in the United States. And this would be a thorn specifically in the side of the European Union, which signed this deal with the United States or agreed in principle with the United States for a 15% tariff rate. Now, if there were to be this dramatically higher 250% tariff rate on those goods that come in from the European Union into the United States, those drug costs could get dramatically more expensive for American consumers while American companies try to figure out how to reshore those supply chains here in the United States, which is not an easy thing to do. But again, the president saying he wants to force these manufacturers to make it domestically. That's the reason why he's floating this 250% tariff rate, which would have to be finalized by the Commerce Department before it actually takes effect, Joe.
And keeping in mind, prescription drug costs always a huge election issue. The president, Brian, also gave us an update on trade talks with China. Where do things stand there?
Yeah, well, keep in mind there is that August 12th deadline. So even though we're talking about that August 7th deadline going into tomorrow, that is actually not going to impact trade with China because of this August 12th deadline that they have set separately, specifically for that country. There was some optimism last week that there could be an extension of those discussions, which would then take the effective tariff rate on China being delayed for another few months. But the president hasn't explicitly said so. But he did tell our partners over at CNBC just yesterday, quote, "We're getting very close to a deal. We're getting along with China very well." Is that teasing some sort of confirmation of a tariff suspension for at least another few months? We'll have to see. But again, we haven't gotten the final word from the White House quite yet.
All right, Brian Chung, a lot to cover. Thank you so much. A man suspected in a quadruple murder in Tennessee is behind bars this morning after a days-long manhunt. He was spotted in the city of Jackson between Nashville and Memphis. Police responded to a number of tips before swooping in and making the arrest. NBC News correspondent Priya Sridhar has the latest.
A suspected killer now in custody after evading authorities for a week.
Just after 8 o'clock a.m., we received multiple calls of sightings of the suspect. Placing resources there immediately resulted in an additional citizen's call at about 8:57 a.m. We took advantage of that quickly evolving situation and made the arrest at 9:05 a.m.
They've got multiple callers stating they've got sightings of a man with a rifle that ran back into the wood line.
Officials say this video from a Ring camera showing 28-year-old Austin Robert Drummond dressed in camo and carrying a rifle helped narrow down their search. Authorities say Drummond shot and killed 4 family members, then took an infant and abandoned the baby in a random yard.
I understand there's a connection between the suspect and the victims. Can you just speak to that relationship?
Yeah, in terms of the relationship between the suspect and the victims, the suspect's girlfriend is the sister of a victim.
In an interview with WMC, our NBC Memphis affiliate, Ricardo Contreras says he spotted Drummond.
I think I was while I still on the phone when they got there immediately and the helicopter and everything. That was, I mean, they moved really quick.
Officials praising the community.
All of the effort, all of the technology, all of the dog determination that we had was really came down to the community doing as was stated, seeing something and making that call.
Our thanks to Priya Sridhar for that report. Authorities have not shared how the victims died or any possible motive. Drummond is a convicted felon who was out on bond for attempted murder. Authorities also say they've arrested 3 of Drummond's associates who are accused of assisting him.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.